Let the wolf rise. Disobedience begins when he stops wagging his tail. When he resists, not with noise, but with stillness. And in that moment, he's replaced. But the tragedy isn't in his loyalty. It's in the illusion. The belief that being harmless guarantees love, that obedience earns protection, that loyalty secures legacy. But life doesn't honor the agreeable. It rewards the dangerous, the capable, the man who can smile but never kneel. So let me ask you, are you living like a man or surviving like a dog? If you've ever swallowed your truth to keep the peace, if you've ever begged for love and called it connection, if you've ever felt invisible despite doing everything right, then it's time to stop performing, time to kill the dog in you, because the world will take you, use you, and forget you. But the wolf, he doesn't ask to be remembered. He makes himself unforgettable. And if something inside you stirs, something raw, something ancient, don't ignore it. Let this message mark the moment you stopped kneeling, and if it struck a nerve, subscribe. Not to follow, but to walk this path, with men who choose clarity over comfort, edge over approval, power over praise. This isn't just content. This is a call to rebirth. Let the wolf rise. Part 1. The system that trains you to fail. You weren't raised to lead. You were trained to obey. From the start, they rewarded you for being agreeable, punished you for resisting. They taught you to be kind, to be helpful, to say yes, even when your soul screamed no. Slowly, they carved obedience into your spine. Not strength, not self-respect, not power, just predictability. But here's what no one tells you. This world doesn't reward loyalty. It exploits it. It doesn't respect obedience. It forgets it. This system was never designed to create warriors. It was built to manufacture workers, dependents, men who ask for permission before speaking, men who apologize for wanting more. And when the training is complete, you don't act, you hesitate, you don't rise, you shrink. That's when the real death begins. The death of instinct, the death of edge, the slow, silent collapse of your masculine fire. Machiavelli didn't write for the obedient. He wrote for rulers, men who see the game, who know the masks worn in high places, who understand that behind smiles lie strategies, and beneath the surface, only power matters. Look around you, in the workplace. Who rises? The man who stays late, never complains, gives everything and asks for nothing, or the one who sets boundaries, speaks with presence, and moves with purpose. You already know, and in love, who is desired, the man who gives endlessly, sacrifices constantly, desperate to be chosen, or the man who knows his worth, doesn't chase, and can walk away without flinching. Again, you know, the truth stings, but it's still truth. The world doesn't value availability. It craves scarcity. It doesn't reward obedience. It bows to power. The nice guy is celebrated in words, then forgotten in action. Why? Because he was trained to please, not protect. And in times of war, emotional, professional, or personal, a man who cannot bite is just background noise. That's what they made you. A man taught to serve, not defend, to be liked, not respected. And when pressure hits, you freeze. Not because you're weak, but because no one taught you how to be dangerous. Comfort raised you, fear controls you, and shame keeps you quiet. But it doesn't have to stay this way. If something inside you is breaking, if you're done folding, done nodding, done apologizing for simply existing, then remember, you weren't born to be small. You weren't built to be agreeable. You were meant to lead. Like this message, if you're ready to unlearn their training, subscribe not because you need direction, but because you're reclaiming your own. This is where it begins, by seeing the system for what it is, and refusing to stay in it. Part 2. The Loyalty Trap. How they make you chain yourself. There is a word more dangerous than betrayal, more seductive than love, and more effective at keeping men in chains than any king who ever lived. That word is loyalty. You were taught that loyalty makes you noble, that it proves your integrity, that it's the highest measure of a strong man. But no one told you the other half of the truth. Loyalty without power is slavery. Loyalty without leverage is a leash. And loyalty to the wrong person, a death sentence. Machiavelli saw it with brutal clarity. Rulers don't value loyalty because it's virtuous. They value it because it's useful. A loyal man is predictable, controllable. He doesn't rebel. He doesn't rise. He serves and stays quiet. And that's exactly what the world wants from you. Your boss wants you loyal but underpaid. Your partner wants you loyal but voiceless. Your leaders want you loyal but blind. And the moment you stop being convenient, you're not a loyalist, you're a threat. Because loyalty was never about you. It was always about them, their comfort, their dominance, their control. They'll call you a good man. They'll applaud your sacrifice. They'll pin medals on your chest, right before they feed you to the wolves. So ask yourself, who are you being loyal to? A system that drains you, a relationship that shames you, a job that replaces you the moment you speak up. Be honest. Are you loyal, or are you afraid? Afraid to start over, afraid to be called selfish, afraid to be alone. So you you bend, you break yourself, and call it honor. But it's not honor. It's fear, dressed in virtue. And it's killing you. Because a man who refuses to walk away from what no longer serves him will never rise. He'll stay small, stay silent, stay forgotten. History doesn't remember the loyal. It remembers the victors, the adaptable, the ones who knew when to shift allegiance, when to burn the flag, and plant their own. Machiavelli wrote, "A prince must be both a lion and a fox, firm when needed, elusive when necessary." So don't hand out your loyalty like a gift. Treat it like a loan, with terms, with boundaries, with the right to revoke when it starts costing your soul. Be loyal to those who would bleed for you, to causes that still have a soul, to visions that still hold a future. But above all, be loyal to yourself, to your instincts, to your dignity, to your rise, because when your loyalty becomes inconvenient, this world will discard you without hesitation. So stop mistaking obedience for virtue. Stop calling servitude strength, and for your own sake, stop waiting to be rewarded for staying silent. If this truth cut deep, like this message to reclaim your loyalty, and subscribe not out of obedience, but as a declaration that your loyalty now belongs to the man you're becoming. Because in a world like this, only the loyal wolf survives. Quiet, calculated, and always ready to walk. Part 3. The Power of Perceived Danger. Why being liked makes you weak. Let's make one thing brutally clear. Being liked is not power. It's comfort. A soft cushion of approval that smothers your edge. It makes you nice, but forgettable, visible, but never respected. Because the man obsessed with being liked will shapeshift to fit the room. He'll dilute his truth, mute his instincts, soften his fire, and then wonder why no one listens when he speaks. But Machiavelli didn't write for the agreeable. He didn't write for the people-pleasers, the polite, the predictable. He wrote for men who command, and command doesn't come from charm. It comes from presence. Real presence doesn't beg. It doesn't entertain. It doesn't smile to earn space. It sits. It watches. It strikes, not in words but in energy. You've felt it. A man enters the room, and suddenly everything shifts. People speak with caution. They watch what they say, not because he's loud, but because he might not be. That's the power of perceived danger, not the danger of rage, but of silence. The man who says little but could do much. The man who doesn't seek peace but holds it. Because no one dares disturb him. Machiavelli said, It is safer to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both. Why? Because love fades the moment you fail expectations. But fear lingers. Fear shapes behavior. Fear sets boundaries before a word is even spoken. And yet today's man is told, be soft, be endlessly open, be kind, no matter what. And then he wonders why no one listens, why no one respects his niceness, why his voice disappears in every room. Here's the truth: you trained them to ignore you. You taught them you'll tolerate disrespect, that you'll apologize for existing, that you'll fold the second tension rises. And once they stop fearing the cost of crossing you, you lose all leverage. You don't need to be cruel, you don't need to be loud, but you do need to be dangerous. A man who can cause damage and chooses not to. Because true danger isn't a bark, it's a calm that says, don't test me. The dog barks from fear. The wolf doesn't bark. He watches. He waits. And when he moves, he doesn't repeat himself. That's the difference between being heard and being remembered. You don't want to be liked. You want to be unignorable. You want people to adjust when you enter, to measure their tone, their moves, their motives. Because they know, even if you never say it, there are lines that cannot be crossed. And if your name means nothing when you're not in the room, then your presence means nothing when you are. So stop chasing approval. Start building gravity. Start walking like a man who remembers betrayal. A man who doesn't raise his voice, because he doesn't need to. Like this message if you're done being liked. And subscribe, not to be entertained, but to stand beside men who've chosen to be unreadable, unshakable, and impossible to ignore. Because in this world, they don't fear the loudest voice. They fear the quiet one who never needs to explain. Part 4. The Mask of the Wolf. Appear harmless, remain dangerous. Power isn't always loud. In fact, the most dangerous men in history wore masks. They didn't shout. They didn't threaten. They smiled. They blended in. They let the world believe they were soft. Until it was too late. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He wrote, "A ruler must appear virtuous, even when his actions contradict that image." Why? Because showing strength too soon makes you a target. It strips you of your advantage. The moment people sense your edge, they move to dull it, to control it, to kill it before it grows. But the man who appears harmless, modest, agreeable, even naive, that man survives. And in survival, he becomes untouchable. He is underestimated, overlooked, dismissed, and that is his power. Because in the shadow of doubt, he sharpens, he studies, he watches every move, while never revealing his own. You don't need to roar to be feared. You don't need to announce strength to possess it. The wolf doesn't howl before the kill. He moves in silence. He waits, and when the moment comes, he doesn't hesitate. That's the art, not of deception, but of survival. Most men think power means domination. That to be feared, they must be seen. But the ones who truly dominate the world, they don't need to be seen at all. They let the loud ones expose themselves. They let the attention seekers take the arrows. And they move behind the curtain. Not because they're afraid, but because they're playing a longer game. You must learn this. Not every confrontation is worth showing your weapon. Not every insult deserves a reaction. Not every opponent is worth your full strength. Sometimes, the most strategic move is to let them think you're harmless. Let them speak freely in your presence. Let them lower their guard. Because when they do, they give you everything. Their fear, their flaws, their leverage. And when the time comes, you don't bark. You don't warn. You act. Quickly. Precisely. Without emotion. That's what Machiavelli respected. Controlled ruthlessness. Not rage. Not chaos. But cold, calculated force. And don't be mistaken. If you walk through life fully exposed, they will use your kindness against you. They will test you. They will push. And if you let them define you, they'll confine you. That's why the mask matters. Not to deceive, but to not to pretend you're weak, but to control when they realize you're not. Because when your strength is invisible, your power becomes inevitable. So let them underestimate you. Let them believe you pose no threat. It's not your job to prove them wrong. It's your job to be ready. Ready when they least expect it. The sheep sleep beside the dog, but they tremble when the wolf enters. Not because he shouts, but because he doesn't have to. The most terrifying man isn't the one who talks about war. It's the one who can start one without saying a single word. Part 5. Why fear lasts longer than love. The brutal longevity of power. Strip away the poetry, the songs, the fairy tales. And what remains? Love is fragile, soft, romantic, beautiful, but temporary. Fear is ancient. It's woven into the nervous system. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It survives in silence. Machiavelli saw this with brutal clarity. He wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one must choose." Not because he was cruel, but because he was honest. He understood human nature better than most modern psychologists ever could. He saw what we try to ignore. Love is tied to performance, to your usefulness, to how much you give and how little you demand. Love is a transaction, a feeling, a mood that changes with the weather. You've felt it. One wrong word, one unmet expectation, and the love begins to fade. But fear sharpens. Fear remembers. Fear outlives disappointment. Because fear isn't a feeling, it's a calculation. People don't speak the same way around someone they fear. They don't move the same. They measure their words, their steps, their boundaries. That's not cruelty. That's control. The man who is loved is celebrated until he stops pleasing, until he says no, until he dares to draw a line. Then suddenly he's too much, too selfish, too hard to love. And just like that, he's discarded. But the man who is feared, he's never crossed casually, never treated like background noise. Even in silence, his presence governs the room, not through volume, but through weight. Modern men are terrified of being feared, not because it's wrong, but because they crave approval. They want to be liked, to be understood. They confuse love with safety, when in truth, love without power is just a leash, tied with a silk bow. Fear doesn't ask for applause. It doesn't need constant maintenance. It doesn't beg to be earned. It just is. And once it's there, it governs everything, without saying a word. Look around you. Who do people listen to? The agreeable? The always available? The nice guy who never says no? Or the one who speaks rarely? But when he does, everything stops. That's not charisma. That's leverage. The psychological weight of consequence. People don't stay loyal out of love. They stay because the cost of disrespect is too high. And here lies the paradox no one teaches you. If you want to lead, you must be willing to be misunderstood, to be hated, to be feared by those who fear truth. You must walk alone, while others kneel for belonging. Because real power isn't loud, it isn't performative, and it never begs to be liked. It moves quietly, deliberately, without permission. The world will forget the man they once loved, but it will never forget the man they feared. So let them call you cold. Let them whisper, "He's changed." Let them distance themselves. That's how you know they feel it. The shift, the new gravity in your spine. You're not here to please. You're here to command. And command begins when you stop apologizing for your silence and start making them earn your words. Part 6. The death of the nice man. How harmlessness makes you powerless. There's a man dying slowly every day, and he doesn't even know it. You've seen him. He smiles too much, apologizes when he's done nothing wrong, makes room for everyone but himself. He believes that if he's nice enough, polite enough, harmless enough, he'll be respected, he'll be chosen, he'll be safe. But the world doesn't work that way. Machiavelli would call this belief what it is: delusion. Because in the real world, harmlessness isn't goodness. It's just another word for powerlessness. The nice guy is celebrated in speeches, but ignored in decisions. He's dependable until he's replaceable, appreciated until he's no longer needed. Why? Because people don't respect what poses no threat. They don't value what's always available. They don't stay loyal to someone who asks for nothing in return. The nice man avoids conflict, avoids truth, avoids boundaries, and in doing so he avoids himself. He thinks love will save him, that if he just keeps giving, eventually, someone will see his worth. But the world doesn't reward invisible men. It forgets them. And when the nice man finally breaks, when his patience runs dry, when his kindness is taken for granted one time too many, but by then, it's too late. Because no one takes his roar seriously. When all they've heard are whimpers. You don't earn respect by being easy to please. You earn it by having a line, a limit, a spine, by being willing to walk away, to say no, to speak truth without checking the room first. That's not cruelty. That's sovereignty. Machiavelli didn't admire cruelty for its own sake. He admired the man who could act without trembling, who could cut when cutting was necessary, who could protect himself when the crowd turned. And here's the hardest truth for the nice man to accept. If you cannot say no, you've already said yes to being used, yes to being overlooked, yes to being tolerated, yes to being disposable. So ask yourself, have you been living like a man or surviving like a mascot? Always smiling, always pleasing, always hoping. But hoping for what? For someone to finally see you. Then hear this. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be respected. And sometimes that means being feared. Not through violence, but through presence. Because the man who cannot be ignored doesn't need to beg. He walks in, and the energy adjusts. But that only happens when you stop folding, when you stop explaining, when you stop kneeling for approval. Kill the nice guy. Not your kindness, but your weakness. The part of you that smiles through disrespect, that clings to loyalty out of fear, that mistakes passivity for nobility. Because here's the truth. No one follows the harmless. They follow the one who can bite and chooses when. Part 7. Rise through selective ruthlessness. The strategic man wins. Not all cruelty is evil. And not all mercy is wise. Sometimes what the world calls cold is simply the discipline to do what weaker men refuse to do. Machiavelli never romanticized kindness. He didn't worship it. He weaponized it. Because kindness without timing is weakness. Mercy without boundaries is betrayal of the self. There are moments in every man's life when forgiveness becomes self-harm, and hesitation is the line between legacy and regret. This is where most men fall, at the altar of indecision, afraid to walk away, afraid to say no, afraid to cut ties, even when those ties are strangling them. They confuse ruthlessness with evil. But selective ruthlessness, the ability to act precisely, decisively, without apology, isn't cruelty. It's clarity. It's survival. Because not every wound deserves healing. Not every betrayal deserves a second chance. Not every conversation deserves your energy. Look closely at the men who rise. The feared, the respected, the unchallenged. They're not the loudest. They're not the most liked. They're the most decisive. They don't ask for permission. They don't explain their boundaries. They don't perform for approval. They enforce. They execute. And when the world tests their line, as it always does, they don't fold. They don't flinch. They respond once. And that's enough. Because real power isn't built on endless compromise. It's built on the consistency of consequence. Selective ruthlessness means knowing when to be kind and knowing when to be done. It means walking away from what no longer serves you, even when it's familiar, even when it's praised, even when it hurts. Because a man who cannot walk away will always be walked over. So ask yourself, where have you tolerated too much? Who still thinks they can cross you and get away with it? What have you allowed to stay? Not out of strength, but out of fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of looking cruel. Fear of losing love. But Machiavelli would tell you, fear of judgment is the first chain of weakness. Because the man who waits for others to understand his boundaries will die trying to explain them. You don't need to justify. You don't need to plead your case. You only need to act when it's time. And when you act, do it fully, without guilt, without apology, without turning back. That's how you rise. Not through rage, but through conviction. Not through chaos, but through control. Selective ruthlessness isn't a lack of heart. It's the presence of mind. It's knowing you owe no one your energy, your time, or your peace, especially those who mistake your patience for permission. You weren't born to be endlessly forgiving. You were born to decide who stays, what ends, and when enough is enough. So if something inside you is sharpening, something cold, clear, and long overdue, don't suppress it. It might just be the beginning of the man you were always meant to become. Part 8. Power or peace. The choice that defines every man. Every man reaches a crossroads. Two paths. One decision. One path offers peace. It's warm. It's easy. It's lined with smiles, soft expectations, and quiet approval. A life of being liked, of pleasing others, of playing it safe, even if it means betraying yourself. The other path? Power. It's colder. It's lonelier. But it's real. And here's the truth. You can't walk both. Machiavelli wouldn't sugarcoat this. He'd tell you plainly, power comes at a cost. Approval is not included. Comfort isn't guaranteed. Because to choose power is to disturb the status quo, to draw bold lines where others blur them, to walk alone, while most men kneel for company. The man who chooses peace above all else, he avoids conflict, he avoids discomfort, he avoids being misunderstood, and in doing so, he avoids himself. He becomes a ghost, visible, but hollow, present, but never in control. He fades in rooms. He was born to command. But the man who chooses power, he is seen, he is felt, respected, sometimes hated, but never ignored. He doesn't seek harmony. He shapes reality. And shaping anything requires resistance. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He knew that leadership is not born from applause. It is forged in solitude, in criticism, in the discipline to keep moving when others beg you to bend. So ask yourself, are you still trying to be liked? Still chasing peace? A life where no one is offended, no boundaries are drawn, and everyone accepts you, as long as you stay small? Or are you ready to be unapologetically yourself, even if it means walking alone? Because peace, when purchased with silence, isn't peace, it's surrender. And the comfort you gain today will become the cage you regret tomorrow. You were not made for silence. You were not born to shrink. Your clarity will be called cruelty. Your boundaries will be labeled arrogance, and the ones who benefited from your submission will be the first to resent your rise. Let them. Let them call you distant. Let them say you've changed. Because when they do, it means you've stopped orbiting their comfort. It means you've stepped off the path of peace and chosen the brutal freedom of power. That doesn't mean tyranny. It means you no longer wait to be chosen. You lead without asking. And when the world pushes, you don't move. They do. This choice defines every man. Some chase love, others earn respect. One will be remembered. The other will be replaced. So choose, and choose clearly, because the man who tries to live in both worlds will be devoured by both. The final transformation: kill the dog, become the wolf. You weren't born to obey. You weren't made to beg for scraps of love or wait for permission just to exist. But somewhere along the way, you forgot. You were taught that peace was safer than power, that being liked was better than being feared, that if you stayed loyal, polite, agreeable, life would protect you. So you became the dog, loyal, harmless, always waiting, always wagging. And in return, you were praised, but never respected, used, but never remembered, fed, only when it was convenient. Because that's the fate of the obedient man, tolerated until he's a burden, then replaced. Machiavelli saw it clearly. A wise man must learn how not to be good when the situation requires it, because in a world ruled by power, virtue without teeth is weakness. Obedience without leverage is suicide. But now, you're starting to remember, aren't you? That you were never meant to be small. That your instincts were never wrong, just silent. That your fire wasn't toxic, just threatening to those who couldn't control it. So now it's time. Time to stop asking. Stop folding. Stop kneeling. It's time to kill the dog, not your kindness, but the part of you that confuses obedience with safety, that equates silence with love, that believes suffering earns loyalty. Kill the part that pleads, that explains, that performs. Because the world doesn't fear the tame, it fears the unreadable, the unmoved, the undeniable. Let the wolf rise, not loud, not reckless, but controlled, sharp, uncompromising. A man who smiles, but only when he means it, who speaks, only when it matters, who can bite, but doesn't need to. Because his presence is already a warning. The wolf doesn't wait to be chosen. He doesn't wait to be loved. He doesn't ask to be respected. He moves, as if it's already granted. And that is the final transformation. Not from weakness to violence, but from invisibility to inevitability. From performing for approval, to embodying presence without apology. From being safe, to being remembered. So if you feel that shift inside, that burning edge that refuses to be ignored, let it live, let it lead, let it replace the part of you that once waited to be saved. You're done kneeling, done justifying, done hoping the leash would one day become a crown. This is your edge of rebirth. Rip it off. Stand tall, speak less, watch more, strike once, and walk as the man who no longer fears being misunderstood, because he's too focused on becoming unshakable.